Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Daniel Gormali. Welcome back to my YouTube. Um, so today I'm going to talk about a game I played against Mike Surtees. He's a very familiar face on the Northwest chess front. I think he's a fairly active player. He's a bit older now, but even now he's still playing a lot and he's doing well in these rapid plays and classical, and he's still pretty sharp. I think he's kept himself in good nick. If you have a conversation with him, he's big on nutrition. He doesn't look his age, I'll be honest. A lot of chess players look older than they are, but he looks different. He looks a bit, looks like somebody who's significantly younger. So he's obviously shows it took looking after yourself. I was reading something today about Middlesbrough, and apparently it's got loads and loads of takeaway joints. That's also in the north of England. That's the northeast, that's closer to where I lived. I have a load of takeaway joints. Anyway, I played Mike in the final round of the Warrington Rapid Play. I'd already talked about that on this channel. And I needed to win a decent prize. I should also mention that after the tournament, I went to Eccles with somebody called Barbara, a charming lady who has put a lot of enthusiasm into Eccles Chess Club. When I did a talk on the Monday, Mike Surtees was there at the club, and he's affiliated to Eccles. He actually lives in Bolton, but he's affiliated to Eccles. There's quite a few good chess players gravitating towards Eccles because they can see the enthusiasm that Barbara is putting into that club. And she actually runs a club on the Monday night where people come in and there's tuition. So I did a talk, Roger Williamson did a talk, and it all went down very well. So it's a community centre really with chess. So people are coming in, they're socialising, they might be escaping from stuff that's going on in their normal life which isn't so great. So it gives them an opportunity to do that and escape. And it also meets on a Wednesday as well. Now, because Barbara's put all this enthusiasm into chess, she's also actually run league matches from her own house, which is getting some kind of pushback from the Manchester Chess Association, because I think they're not too happy with league matches taking place in somebody's house. Leave your comments down below. What do you think about Barbara's situation? Do you think that that's legitimate concern? I think it's more the case that when people come in and they're not known, because Barbara's like new to chess, he came in really in a big way to chess around about sort of COVID probably time. When people are coming in as newcomers, you often get people a little bit wary of them. So I would imagine in 5 or 10 years' time, she'll be part of the establishment. But at the moment, her and her husband Stephen are getting a little bit of negativity. Let's hope that will change. Anyway, I want to show you this game against Mike Surtees. So Mike is actually got a very unusual style. You could say that he's a bit of an eccentric in some ways, not in a nasty way, but in a nice way. But a little bit like David Bronstein. He's got very original ideas about chess. And I would say he's almost like a forerunner of a Leela, because Leela has this very similar style to what Mike plays. When you play Leela, especially at peace odds, it plays a very similar way to the way Mike plays, where it doesn't really give you anything to bite on, and then gradually expands and then comes up with good attacking ideas. So he's almost like the sort of like forerunner of Leela in a way. A3 is a good move because it stops black from going A4. But the engine, of course, is not particularly happy about this whole setup from White. I did say to Barbara later on, I said, although this is a way to play, the problem is the engine is better at doing it than a human is. Like, a human can't play like this type of style of chess as effectively as the way the engine can. The engine, defends so well. Humans just can't defend that well. When you play openings like double fianchetto and modern stuff, you're giving the other opponent a space advantage. That often means they get an attack. But if you're very good at defending and counter-attacking, then that won't matter. But humans in general aren't quite as accurate. Okay, so I went rookie. I was just trying to play sensible moves. I went knight f8. So this is almost like a prophylactic move. I understood what his idea was. I said this to somebody actually. Maybe it was Barbara. I said, you know, what is White's idea? White's idea with that move, if you think about it, so you should always try and think, what is White's idea? By the way, I had to record this entire game from memory. I may have got the move order mixed up a little bit. But I think I remembered most of it. But h3, so obviously these games aren't recorded live. A lot of tournaments, they should all be recorded live now. We're in the 21st century. Come on, guys, sort it out. I must admit that the Warrington Rapid Play was a great event. It's in a beautiful location in the school. Warrington itself is a lovely town. I think they've got a bit of money there because it's in Cheshire. It's quite posh, actually, surprisingly posh. So yeah, they've got a bit of money there. There's a lot of nice houses around that area. So I went knight f8. So the idea is if White goes g4, you go knight g6. So that's a prophylactic point because now knight h4 is going to cause White a bit of a headache. And obviously they can't go here really, or well they can, but then they lose a pawn. So I think that White would have been, oh, hang on a minute, if I go here, can he go here? That's something I didn't really consider during the game. Maybe that was a problem. Because now if I move the knight, but I do have that move immediately, that might be an issue. That move might, I think if they take knight g2 is quite good for black, like something like this. And then, yeah, you're doing well on the lights. There is f takes g7, it's not 100% clear, but let's say they don't take and they move the bishop. You're only one move away from checkmate because knight f3 can only be defended by the knight, but it's good enough. But yeah, maybe knight h5 is a bit murky, right? But probably okay for black. Knight h5. If knight c3, you could play g6 or maybe even think about sacrificing a piece with knight f4. Something like this is playable for black. And f3. So all a bit murky, but I was fairly happy at this point. I think I was always doing reasonably well in this game, but hang on a minute. Why haven't we got any more moves? No, sorry, I played the wrong moves. c3, I was panicking there. I thought maybe I hadn't put the whole game in. Bishop f5, sorry, it's different variation. So bishop f5, so I think c3 was maybe a bit dubious because bishop f5 is now a problem. So I know we reached this position, and I was expecting Mike to maybe, you know, this is a bit of a gamble, this move f4, because it's very, very loosening. But I wondered if he might try f4. Because the point is that if you take, well, probably you just take back. And then you threaten e5. Now, it's a real gamble because you're very overextended. You're threatening this move, pawn e5. The knight is attacking f4, but it's defended at the moment. I could play him like bishop h5, but then he goes e5, so that's a problem. Unless knight f4 is playable, I guess something like this. Yeah, you always get comp. You always get comp in these lines. In fact, that might be quite annoying for White. Because now I'm threatening bishop takes f4. And if he goes rook f2, maybe I have bishop g3. Although rook f2, I've already got 2 pawns for the piece. Rook f2, bishop g3, there is knight g3. Knight takes g3, bishop takes d1, rook takes d1, which is a bit murky because he's controlling the f5 square. So in that situation, you have 3 pieces. So just to show you that variation, this is, I would be worried here as black because knight f5 is coming very quickly. But maybe g6. But g6 they have rook f1. g6 to prevent knight f5, but they have rook f1, attacking the knight. Now, maybe knight d7, rook f7, knight e5 is playable, admittedly. But knight d7, they could maybe play other moves, c4 springs to mind. It's a very murky position. And probably if you go here, there's c4. Attacking the knight. So, a bit murky. Bit murky. There are many other options as well. I think if you had this position at classical, you'd figure out a good way for black. For example, even in this position, knight c5 is a candidate move I was thinking about during the game, and then try and take on d3 was maybe an issue. There's also taking on e4, and then when white, yeah, this might be the main problem, because if they take back, that looks very loose, and if they go here, you have this move inserted. So that looks quite good for. I did see this variation during the game, although you could try something like this with some kind of fighting compensation. I think he's a pawn down here, but my king is a little bit exposed. I guess king g8 is probably safe enough. But king g8, knight e4. You know, you're playing here as well. You're playing here as white. You know, it's not that clear. So anyway, that didn't happen. Obviously, with rapid play, a lot of these moments whiz past because you don't really have time. A lot of it's just intuition. You've got to get on with it. You know, it's 15 plus 10 seconds, so you don't have much time to think. Here I've made a slight mistake. I went bishop f8, which is not the most accurate. Apparently I should have gone b5. And that increases my control over the centre. I wasn't really worried about him taking and trying to win a pawn, because clearly I thought this would be borderline suicide for white. So I wasn't really worried about that. But yeah, I think if I had more time, I might have played b5. When bishop f8 was slightly inaccurate. I'm not sure around about whether he actually did go king h1 here. I think that might have been a error by him if he did, but I'm not sure also about the move order, whether he actually went king h1 here. But I remember we reached something like this. That's the problem, you have to recall the entire game from memory. And I was pretty tired, because I'd already just played two rapid play tournaments in a row, which is very tiring. When I played UK Rapid earlier this year, 6 games on the Saturday, 5 games on the Sunday, and you're playing good players, and it just really takes it out of you. And I remember going back on the train, I was absolutely shattered. So this is like the equivalent of that. You know, you're playing the same amount of games, because it was 5 games on this Saturday at Sheffield. It was only 5 games, but here it was 6 games. Although admittedly I did miss the first round because of the I missed the first round because of the fact where I mentioned in the other video about Snake's Pass. I didn't want to go through Snake's Pass, which is like a range of hills. You know, it's a road through a range of hills, like a snaky sort of road, which is pathetic, really. You know, you've got to face your fears in life. But when knight takes e4. Now, I did actually consider just giving up the exchange here, which actually would have been, because white's position is not good, this would have been very good for white. And there was a lovely continuation, which I missed during the game. I saw queen b6, but I thought king d1. But apparently this is bad because of... I mean, clearly if they give up the bishop, you know, you have tremendous compensation. I mean, it's more than compensation. White is just in trouble. You know, because this bishop, control of light squares, white's got a very bad sort of, you know, open position. I would say is too loose. Knight g5 is a candidate move. Bishop f3 is also a possible move. Looks extremely suspicious for white indeed. Don't see a forced win, but it just looks bad. On knight c5 is also maybe, but then queen c4, so probably not knight c5. Okay, so although knight c5, queen c4, bishop f3, because you take on c5, I take on b2 is also. But yeah, king g1 I couldn't refute. But apparently I think you can even take here, right? And I think something like this. Now they have to go here maybe. So they can't, this is a tactic I saw, that I could go bishop c5 in many positions. But if they go rook f1, maybe just go rook d8. And then your threat is to take and go rook d2 or something like that. So stuff like this becomes possible and very suspicious for white. Like I say, you could just play for compensation. You could probably play another move. You don't even have to take on f2. You Probably other moves will give you a decent position anyway. Even move like maybe you just h5 is possible. Good compensation for a very small material deficit. But I thought, you know, I got a good position anyway. I don't need to sacrifice. So I took on e4. I started going slightly wrong around about here. So yeah, there's lots of options here. I think the computer says, the best move, which is quite hard to see, is h6. So just say, look, I've got a great position. I was talking about this actually in my lecture at the Eccles Chess Club. I was saying that too many people try to do something on every single move. You've got to get out of this habit of doing stuff. And obviously I'm not listening to myself because I got bishop h5, which creates a threat. Threat to win the knight, right? But it does lose time as well. What you should do is play by position. So what does it mean when you say play by position? It means that you're not changing anything. You're not sacrificing. You're not altering a position by making exchanges or creating threats. You're basically just improving your position. You're playing by the rules of the position. So this is a Russian term. I think Botvinnik was a big fan of that sort of term. Dvoretsky used it a lot in his writings. It's like a Russian school of chess. But h6 is a typical, you know, I would say actually the greatest exponent of playing by position, and certainly in the modern era, was Magnus Carlsen. He's great at that sort of thing, in my opinion. There's other players like Gelfand also very good at that sort of thing. Karpov in his prime. But h6, you're basically just saying, like, I improve my position. Queen c2, apparently you just go f6 or something, and then you put the bishop on f7. White can't really do much because they can't play f4 because of the pin. They can't really go c4 because you're going to lose a pawn. They don't want to take there because of bad structure. So what do? You know, and you have improved your position. So that's what I should have done. But of course you're rushing rapid play. So I went there. Around about this point in the game, actually it's about equal. Or I'm slightly better but not enough. And yeah, maybe you should have gone knight g3 to f5 earlier actually. Yeah. So this was was c4 okay? No, c4 was a blunder. C4 was a blunder. He shouldn't have played c4. I think he should have gone something else. I can't remember what the something else was. Yeah, maybe there was something like rook c1 or something was playable. I think this position, the computer says, is about equal. It's not really. It looks better for black, but it's not. But he went c4, which has the idea. Well, firstly, I should just take, and then apparently I'm a lot better after this. And I should have just done that immediately. But I went queen d7, and now I've got rook f, rook. That's actually a mistake. He didn't go there. I forgot that to put the correct rook. He actually went here, but it ends up transposing anyway. He can't go there because the rook takes b3. And after rook d7, rook takes b1 is winning. So he didn't go there. He actually went there. But for the purpose of this game, we're going to give that move because I went rook d8. After he played rook bd1, but it doesn't really matter because we end up in the same endgame. So it transposes to what actually happened in the game. Rook a1, I went rook a3. Of course, I'm lazy. I should have changed the PGN file and put a different move order in instead, which might have made for a better video. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah, at this point, I'm now winning. I went b3. So the game, actually, even here, Mike's a tricky player, and I probably should have made better use of this position than I did. Although it was still, like here actually was a key moment. I probably should have just gone f6. I was thinking about it. I just keep the pawn on b3, but I slightly miscalculated here. Maybe h6 or h5 was also playable. I could also take on e4. That's also an option, and probably pretty good. I'm sure that's also winning, but then he can take on b3, so at least then he would win the But here I started to lose the plot. I went b2. And I'd underestimated knight c3. Because rook a1, I forgot that he can actually just go... Oh no, maybe he can't go h5 because of bishop takes e4. So maybe rook a1 was also good. But rook a1, I guess he goes king f... No, what does he play after rook a1? So rook a1, h5, there's bishop e4. Bishop e4, knight e4, right? That looks good for black. So maybe rook a1 was just winning. I guess rook a1 he moves his king, right? To try and threaten to take on b2. But it does look bad for white anyway. But I think there's lots of ways to win by this point. I went rook a3. So now I just have to be careful. So this is where the trickiness comes in, because obviously you want to do this, but the problem is that he's got this move. Now you can still make a check there and then queen the pawn, but you're not better anymore. I mean, probably you're not losing either, but you could get a variation like this and queen the pawn, and when he queens, he has to take with the bishop, of course. Well, he doesn't have to take with the bishop, but I think he's better to take with the bishop. He could probably, even this position, I don't actually have a way to stop the pawn. It's just kind of amusing. So, but he's giving me an extra move, so there's no need to do that. So you should take with the bishop probably. And I queen, and he queens, and I guess he goes queen g7, right? But I think this is a draw because I can probably just go queen b2, check, which actually would also be check, yeah. And probably lots of moves draw here actually. I don't think he's got enough here to win because my queen and knight are going to combine quite well. I don't think he's in trouble either, so probably would have been a draw. But so just got to be careful about that. It's easy to mess up when you think everything wins, but of course I can just take. And I was lucky that I'm now, what's the pawn count? I'm now pawn up, but he's got lots of weaknesses. So I went king e7. In fact, I don't know why I didn't just take that pawn, which is also kind of crazy because I forgot I could just take the pawn. And I had loads of time as well. Rook e3, he has rook b5, which is kind of annoying. Now, you're probably still doing well even there, but why allow rook b5 and then you're going to drop b7? Like you have to take on e4 and no, but knight e4 he has rook e5. So rook c3, rook b5 is very annoying. Maybe you have to go knight d3, rook b7, and then try and be tricky with stuff with knight f4. And you're probably still better, but you shouldn't go down that variation. So I just improved the king. g5, rook. Yeah, because if he goes king f2, I have knight d3, and clearly rook e2 is rook c4. So it's all bad at this point. And I managed to hoover up. So by this point, I'm now 3 pawns up, which is way too many pawns, right? So I went knight e6. Not the only way to win. Knight e2, knight d3 was obviously good enough as well. Maybe a more effective way to win was knight d3 check, actually. Yeah, I should have gone knight d3 looking at this position now. I think I did consider it. Knight d3. But maybe I think I miscalculated. For king g1, I forgot about rook c1 check, for example. Although then you can go bishop f1. I mean, it's completely winning. You can even go king g1, rook c1, bishop f1, b5, rook h7, b4, rook g7, b3, and your pawn's going to queen. By the time he does anything on the king side. But I just thought, why bother? Just, when you're winning, the thing to do is just keep control and don't give them any chances to get back in the game. And I think I did a reasonable job of that. b5. So again, trickiness, because now Mike's threatening rook c8 check. Very easy, blitz or rapid to forget about it and blunder. But fortunately, pushing the pawn actually defends the rook. So the game finished here in this position. Now, bear in mind that f5 is winning, of course, but maybe there's some vague hope. I don't think there's much vague hope, but there's vague hope that he could take and then go king d3 and at least But then f4 is a very easy win to bring the king up. But I just went knight e6 and might resign because he can't now approach the pawn, because if he goes here, I go knight f4 check. And if he goes bishop here, then I go king here, and he still can't go there because of knight f4 check. And if he exchanges, then it's an easily winning king and pawn endgame. So I'm quite tired, that's why I keep changing my head position. The only other move was bishop f1, but then even knight c5 is good because it stops him going king d3. It also attacks that pawn. Bear in mind at this point I'm 3 pawns up. And normally you think like a pawn is enough to be winning, but knight d4 is winning because then king d3 you have c2. And then he's basically tied down to that pawn, and then I can just spend all the time in the world to go king e7, f5, king f6. Very, very simple win. So yeah, I'm fairly happy with that game overall. And Mike is, I know that Mike is a tough opponent. I've played him many times before, and we've generally had tough battles. And he's an interesting player, like basically the forerunner to Leela, I would say. But it was, and the other thing I would mention about that, it was very enjoyable to go down to Eccles Chess Club in Manchester. And the very kind of real people there, aren't they, in sort of Manchester kind of area, in that kind of Lancashire, you know, there's also Liverpool as well. It's not a million miles from Manchester. Sheffield, I was there at, you know, people are like gritty and real there in that area. You know, they don't take bullshit, do you know what I mean? They're honest. So anyway, so yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that video. Please check out the Eccles website, particularly if you live in that area. They'll be very welcome. They'll be very happy to welcome new members.